February 23, 1995. A 28-year-old British trader boards a flight from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur. He is not traveling alone. His wife Lisa is with him. They leave behind an apartment in the Orchard Road district, a six-figure salary, and a secret. The secret is an account number, 5 digits. Error account 88888 was opened on July 3, 1992, supposedly to catch minor trading mistakes by inexperienced staff on Barings' Singapore trading floor, a clerical convenience. By February 23, 1995, the day the trader fled, it contained losses of £827 million. That was more than Barings Bank's entire capital. Twice over, the bank that financed the Napoleonic Wars, the bank whose clients included the Queen of England, Elizabeth II herself, held an account at Barings. A financial institution that had survived the American Revolution, the fall of Napoleon, to world wars, and the Great Depression. Was already dead. It just didn't know it yet. February 26, 1995, 3 days after the trader flees. A senior settlements clerk in London, Brenda Granger, 20 years at Barings, finally looks at the 88,888 account. What she sees makes no mathematical sense. She calls her manager. The manager calls the Bank of England. Within hours, it is clear. Barings Futures Singapore holds open positions on the Singapore and Osaka exchanges worth $7 billion. The losses are still growing. The bank is insolvent and has been for weeks. The Bank of England convenes an emergency meeting. They consider a bailout. They refuse. On March 6, 1995, 1 week after the discovery, the Dutch bank ING purchases Barings. The entire 233-year-old institution. The price, £1. £1. And this is where every documentary ends. This is where ours begins, because 6 months before the collapse, in August 1994, an internal auditor named James Baker submitted a report to Barings senior management in London. His report stated, in writing, that Nick Leeson controlled both the trading desk and the settlement function in Singapore, that there was no segregation of duties, that the person who placed the trades was the same person who recorded whether the trades had lost money. Barings management read James Baker's report. They did not restructure the Singapore operation. They did not investigate the 88,888 account. They did nothing. And then between January and February 1995, after they had been formally warned, they approved £835 million in transfers from London to Leeson's Singapore account. Here is what institutional failure actually looks like. It doesn't look like a conspiracy. It looks like a report that was read and filed and ignored while the money kept flowing. Barings Bank was founded in 1762 by Francis Baring. From a single office in Mincing Lane, London, it grew into the most powerful merchant bank in the world. It financed the British war effort against Napoleon. It served as the British government's agent during the Louisiana Purchase, the transaction that doubled the size of the United States. It was said, without irony, that Barings was the 6th great power of Europe. By the 1980s, Barings had expanded into securities trading. It built a presence in Tokyo, Hong Kong, and Singapore. The bank that had spent centuries avoiding speculation was now chasing the profits that came from trading. In 1989, Barings hired Nicholas Leeson. He had left school at 18 with a single level in mathematics. He had worked as a clerk at Coutts, the Queen's Bank, and then at Morgan Stanley, where he learned the back-office mechanics of futures settlement. He was not a university graduate. He was not a trained trader. Barings sent him to Singapore in 1992 to run the settlement operation for its new futures trading desk. Within a year, he was running the trading desk as well. Here is what that meant. In every properly managed financial institution, the front office of trading and the back office of settlement are separated. The trader places the trade. The settlement clerk confirms the trade. The trader cannot settle. The settler cannot trade. This is not a best practice. It is the single most basic control in financial services. Barings placed Leeson in charge of both. This was not an oversight. It was a management decision. And on July 3, 1992, Leeson opened account 8888. The 88888 account was designated as an error account, a place to park minor trading mistakes until they could be corrected. Every futures broker had error accounts. They were supposed to be temporary. Leeson's 888888 account never returned to zero. Within weeks of opening it, Leeson had used 888888 to hide a loss of £20,000. Instead of reporting the loss to London, he booked it into 88888, where it sat, concealed from the reports that London received. The mechanism was simple. Leeson placed trades on the CIMEX floor. If a trade lost money, he booked the loss into 88,888 instead of into Barings' proprietary account. Then he requested cash from London to meet the margin calls from the exchange. London, seeing the margin call as a client obligation, wired the money. The losses accumulated. By the end of 1993, 88,888 contained £23 million in hidden losses. By the end of 1994, the figure was £208 million. Barings London, looking at Leeson's reports, believed he had generated profits of £28 million in 1994, making him one of the bank's most profitable traders. He was awarded a bonus of £130,000. The £28 million in profits did not exist. They were the inverse of the losses hidden in 888888. By January 1995, Leeson was no longer arbitraging between exchanges. He was betting, taking unhedged directional positions that the Nikkei to 125 would rise. He held approximately 20,000 Nikkei futures contracts representing a notional value of $7 billion. On January 17, 1995, the Kobe earthquake struck. Magnitude 6.9, more than 6,000 dead. The Nikkei plummeted. Leeson's positions were catastrophic. And instead of admitting the loss, he doubled down. He sold options, a short straddle, designed to profit only if the market stabilized. The market did not stabilize. Between January 17th and February 23rd, the Nikkei dropped 1,500 points. By February 23rd, the losses in 88,888 had reached £827 million. That day, Leeson and his wife walked out of their apartment, drove to Changi Airport, and boarded a flight to Kuala Lumpur. He left a note, "I'm sorry, August 1994, 6 months before the collapse." James Baker, Barings' internal auditor, traveled to Singapore to conduct a routine review of Barings Futures Singapore. What he found was not routine. Baker identified that Leeson controlled both the trading floor and the settlement department. His report stated there was a lack of segregation of duties between the FS's front and back offices. He recommended that Barings immediately separate the trading and settlement functions, appointing a dedicated settlements manager who would report directly to London, not to Leeson. The report was delivered to Peter Norris, the chief executive of Barings Investment Bank, and to the bank's Asset and Liability Committee. Baker's recommendations were discussed. The discussion concluded that Leeson's dual role was an acceptable risk. No changes were made. No segregation was implemented. Leeson continued to trade and settle his own trades. Critical detail. The Baker report was not an external investigation. It was not a whistleblower complaint. It was a routine internal audit, the kind of review that exists precisely to identify the risk that Barings failed to address. The system worked. The people who received the system's findings chose not to act on them. The narrative that followed the collapse framed Leeson as a sophisticated fraudster who deceived everyone. He was not. The fraud was crude. He hid losses in an error account. He requested money from London. London sent the money. The only sophistication required was the sophistication of an institution that chose, after being formally warned, not to examine what its most profitable trader was doing. Between January 1st and February 23, 1995, 8 weeks, Barings London transferred £835 million to Barings Futures Singapore. These were not hidden transfers. They went through Barings London Treasury Desk. They were approved by senior management. Each transfer was a margin call from CIMEX or OSE, a demand for cash to cover potential losses on Leeson's open positions. Each margin call was answered. The question that has never been answered publicly is what Barings Treasury Desk thought the £835 million was for. If Barings believed Leeson was running a low-risk arbitrage strategy, £835 million in margin calls made no sense. Directional baits on the Nikkei require that kind of margin. Someone in London should have asked. Someone in London had the authority to ask. And someone in London had been told 6 months earlier that the man requesting the money had no oversight. On February 24, 1995, the day after Leeson fled, Barings board approved a bonus pool of £100 million. Leeson was arrested at Frankfurt Airport on March 2, 1995. He was extradited to Singapore, pleaded guilty to cheating and forgery, and served for years and for months in Changi prison. Leeson went to prison. The system punished the individual. And Peter Norris, the chief executive who had received James Baker's report and chosen not to act on it. Peter Norris was banned from working in the City of London for 18 months. He was not prosecuted. He did not go to prison. After his ban expired, he resumed a career in finance. The other senior managers who approved the £835 million in transfers. None were prosecuted. None served prison time. The Bank of England inquiry criticized their judgment in measured language. It did not refer them for criminal investigation. This is what institutional accountability looks like when the institution is accountable to itself. The individual with no oversight and a single level went to prison. The people who gave him that control, who read the report that warned them, and who sent him £835 million after reading it, continued their careers. Let's be precise about what we're looking at. Barings Bank was destroyed by Nicholas Leeson. That is a true statement. It is also insufficient. Barings Bank was destroyed by an institution that placed a 25-year-old without a degree in charge of both trading and settlement on a major Asian futures exchange. Barings Bank was destroyed by an institution that ignored its own internal auditor's warning, in writing, 6 months before the collapse, that no segregation of duties existed in Singapore. Barings Bank was destroyed by an institution that approved £835 million in margin calls from a single trader in 8 weeks, so after being told that trader had no oversight and never asked what the money was for. The rogue trader narrative is satisfying because it is simple. One man, one account, one catastrophic failure. The complexity lies in the fact that the one man was placed in a position where his judgment was the only judgment that mattered, by people who were told and who chose not to act. This is not a defense of Leeson. He committed fraud, he had losses, he deserved his prison sentence. But the institutional failure that enabled him, the decision to ignore an internal audit report, the decision to send £835 million without asking what it was for. Those decisions were made by people who were not prosecuted, were not imprisoned, and who returned to careers in finance after the briefest of suspensions. Barings was sold for £1 on March 6, 1995, the institution that had survived Napoleon to world wars. And the Great Depression could not survive the consequences of its own refusal to act on a warning, had paid its own auditor to deliver. Nick Leeson went to prison. James Baker's report was filed and forgotten. And the £827 million was never recovered. Some cases are closed. The truth isn't. If you found this investigation useful, subscribe. Every week, Cryptic goes beyond the headlines on cases where the official story doesn't hold up. The next investigation is already in progress.